Okay, as you can see from the dark background of everything, this is going to be a very boring lecture, and we're not doing any jokes this time because learning is key and jokes are for the weak. So just before we start, I want to show you my references and what I'm going to be using to teach you. So a lot of the stuff is going to be from Google. Okay, enough of that. Okay, so talking about menstrual cycle, so you have two phases. You have the follicular phase, which is what I explained to you. So I only explained half to you. Didn't really explain the second half. So this is the follicular phase. FSH is going to stimulate your ovaries. You're going to get increase in your follicle sizes because of the maturation. Eventually you get to like day 14 and you'll have ovulation. So the most mature follicle is going to secrete an egg, and that's going to go. So just kind of to give you an idea of the kind of anatomy and stuff so you know what's going on. So your ovaries are here. So you have obviously your vagina, the cervix, the uterus, and then your fallopian tubes are here, and then the ovaries kind of sit here. And the ovary will secrete an egg during ovulation, day 14 roughly. So the endometrium is actually a lining here. So it's just a lining. It has a number of layers. You have the muscle layer, which is this bit here, and then you have the main lining, which is what sheds during menstruation. So during the first phase, you'll have maturation of the follicles, egg will get released. So you know up to that bit because I explained it to you. And then usually the second half of the cycle, so if you have a look here, just to see how I can explain it to you, you get the mature follicle that released the egg becomes something called a corpus luteum, which is this thing here. So there's no more estrogen being secreted actively. I did have another image here that shows quite a good... Where the hell has it gone? One sec. So if you look at here, for example, this is your estrogen levels, and this is your progesterone levels. So the first phase, like I said, estrogen increases and increases, and that stimulates the release of something called LH. You get an LH surge. There's no LH here in this diagram, but that's kind of a separate thing to talk about. But basically, estrogen increases to a certain level. When it gets to a level, the same pituitary gland that's secreting FSH is going to start secreting loads of LH, and that's going to basically stimulate the most mature follicle to release an egg. So you can imagine if you're already having massive amounts of estrogen, how it could affect your cycle, because what happens is based on how much estrogen you have at this point. And then basically after ovulation it decreases. The corpus luteum produces small amounts of estrogen just to kind of keep it regulated, but mainly you're producing progesterone at this point. So what does progesterone do? So I mentioned the endometrium after the egg has come through. The progesterone actually thickens this lining here. Okay? And depending on whether a female gets pregnant or she doesn't get pregnant, is what will lead to the changes here. So it thickens regardless because it's trying to prepare for a pregnancy in case there is a pregnancy. So usually people try to get pregnant, usually they try to get pregnant like mid-cycle, so they want to try and get pregnant after the ovulation because it lasts about 4 to 5 days after ovulation, I think is the best time or the most likely time. But you get thickening of this lining, and then if you don't get pregnant, what happens is the corpus luteum will degenerate, and that will lead to a sharp drop in progesterone, and that's what leads to a shedding of this endometrial lining. That's this lining here, which is what causes your monthly bleed in a healthy individual. Now, if the person does get pregnant, and that's like a whole other story, then the endometrial lining needs to be maintained. Obviously, you don't want it to shed while you're pregnant because you're going to get a miscarriage. So instead of your corpus luteum secreting progesterone because it's going to degenerate, the placenta secretes beta HCG, which I'm not sure you're familiar with. It's the pregnancy hormone that they test for in the pregnancy tests, and that also leads to increased thickening of the lining. So the placenta basically maintains the endometrial lining, if that makes sense. So I know you were saying, some people get less pain and PMS symptoms, etc. So there's a number of factors that can be genetic, can be diet related, depending on how the hormones affect you. But in terms of pain, the main one is endometriosis. So endometriosis is basically this endometrial lining. The tissue of the endometrial lining has gone somewhere else as well. So it could be here in the muscle, which is known as adenomyosis. It could be in the ovary, it could be in the pelvis, it could be in the abdomen. You can have endometrial tissue anywhere. Like ectopic means that it's in the wrong place. So you can have ectopic endometrial tissue anywhere. And that will grow with the normal endometrial lining. It will shed in the same way. You'll get abnormal bleeding. You'll get more painful periods because this tissue is not where it's supposed to be. So you can get pain in different areas and it can be quite severe. So endometriosis is one of the main types of symptoms that you can get if you have very, very painful periods. That could be one of the reasons. What else did I want to talk about? So I think I did go through this with you. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. For me, it's kind of straightforward, really. So you can see the progesterone dies away. And as you can see, at the start of the cycle, you have very low estrogen levels. So it explains the importance of not messing with the balance. And basically, like I said, with the estrogen pill as well, if you already have high levels, your FSH has nothing to do because it goes up and down based on your estrogen levels anyway. So you're not going to get no maturation of the follicles. So your follicle sizes are going to stay very small because there's nothing to stimulate them. Your FSH is reduced because of your estrogen levels. You also get a progesterone pill as well. And increased progesterone is going to thicken this lining. Where's it gone? Thicken this lining. So that's what progesterone pills do. And they can even stop periods, if you continually take them. But for people who have irregular cycles, and remember I said, I don't know if I said it to you or if I thought I was going to say it to you, but if you have irregular cycles, it's good to be on the pill initially to kind of reset your cycle. So you give estrogen for a certain amount of days, and you'll give progesterone for a certain amount of days to mimic this cycle. And then you have the 7-day rest period, like you would kind of mimicking menstruation, where you have the 7 days of bleeding technically. And basically, when you stop taking the progesterone, you're going to get shedding of that lining, because that lining can only be maintained if you have progesterone. So also, if people come with excess bleeding after maybe surgery or after removal of fibroids or whatever, you can give them progesterone to kind of stop their periods for a certain while if they have heavy bleeding. There are a lot of uses that you can use hormonally, but you have to be very careful with how you use them, because obviously it does affect the brain as well, because you are affecting the pituitary and how it's secreting hormones. You don't want to mess with the balance too much, but the pill has been known to be very good for people who have problems with their cycle. So I hope all of that made sense. There's probably a number of things that I wanted to say and go through as well, but if I do think of them, then I will let you know. Just so you know what fibroids are, because I have spoke about them a number of times, I will check my good friend Google. The accent gets me, man. I can't deal with this accent. Anyway, back to seriousness, of course. Okay, so I was going to go into fibroids. Let me just type that here. Okay, so these are what fibroids are. So, you get like a growth, and they can be in a number of places. So, the best place to have them is probably... I thought there might be an image that shows a better one, but there isn't. So you can have greater than 50% of the fibroid inside this area. It's more easy to remove through very minor surgery. The tough ones are, they're usually asymptomatic anyway, so if they're here, they probably won't affect you too much. But depending on how much they grow out, they can affect you. And if they're like here, or here, they can be very painful, depending on the size of them and how much they affect you. So that's what they are. They're just growths. They can be in the muscle layer, it can be inside, and they can lead to abnormal bleeding. It's not necessarily pain that they cause, and they do present in very different ways, but usually it's abnormal bleeding because they're very vascular. These aren't very good diagrams because they're animated, they're not actual images. But let me see if I can find a proper one. I saw some really good images when I was in my rotation because they have it on the camera. But literally, they look like that, but with really big blood vessels. But I don't really have a good image on here. But anyway, they're very vascular, so they will bleed. And like I said, more common in females who are African. So yeah, hope that made sense. I did kind of try and add a few basic stuff in there, and I hope they did make sense. But let me know if there's anything else that you didn't understand or whatever. I'll try go through it, try to see if I can make sense of it. But until then, what he said or what she said, I don't even know if it's a male or female at this point. Anyway, hope that was interesting. Peace out.